is our final Pathways to Peace lecture for this year, and we're so happy to be together. Good evening. Welcome to this lecture series. My name is Xandra Wagner. I serve as the Interfaith Chaplain here at the University of Laverne, and I'm delighted to be one of the collaborators for this lecture series, a Baha'i-inspired lecture series focused on peacemaking for both our campus and also in the broader context of the world. We're excited about tonight's lecture by Timothy Conley, who will speak on transformative education. He'll be formally introduced in a moment, but I do want to extend a special thank you, a special welcome to you, and express our gratitude for being part of this Pathways to Peace lecture series. For those of you who have been here before, you've heard me say this 6 times or 5 times this year, but I'm going to say it again. The university has a long-standing connection to the value of peace, a central value of the Church of the Brethren founders of the university. There is a significant resonance between the university's foundations in peace and the Baha'i community. Baha'i communities are diligent advocates for the promise of world peace and have developed strategies to encourage peace through values of oneness, unity, harmony, justice, and the nobility of humanity. The Baha'i community especially always seeks to provide real avenues of hope, which is a gift truly to all of us. I want to say a thank you to some of the collaborators, the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Rancho Cucamonga, who envisioned the creation of this lecture series, and also just a general thank you to the Baha'i communities of Southern California and the Baha'i-inspired organization People for Peace and Prosperity, all who have been collaborators and sponsors for this lecture series. And then always, I want to say a special thank you to Sohaila Azizi, a member of the Baha'i community and kind of the key representative collaborator for this lecture series and so many other collaborations here between the Baha'i community and the University of Laverne. So it's a pleasure always to collaborate, partner with Sohaila, a true hero and force for good in our communities. So at this time, I want to invite Sohaila to come forward, and she will give our formal introduction of our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. That beautiful introduction of the connections between the collaborators that you mentioned, and we're just all little contributors and participants in this huge vision that the university has. Through so many programs, we work together through the Baha'i community, as well as the interfaith community, the Summer of Service projects, the School of Philosophy and Religion, and Xandra and I have a long history together, about 3 decades almost, of working towards those missions of the university that is very much in line with the missions of the Baha'i faith. So with the love and gratitude of the Baha'i community is what I'm presenting today, and gratitude for Tim. I call him Tim, but I'm going to introduce him as Professor Timothy Conley, who is the department chair, or has been. He sent me an updated bio, so at one point or another he's held these positions. So when I give you the introduction, it will include all of the roles that he's played. So he's a very multifaceted individual. He has many talents, some of which he's shared with us. I've known him through the years, and he's never said no to anything that we've asked him to do. It has to do with students, with promoting the mission of peace. So he is or has held a chair position with the Department of Cinema and Film at the California College of Arizona State University. And for that institution, he has also held interim department chair appointments. And those are in the areas of general education, graphic design, interactive marketing, and virtual effects departments. So he's previously taught courses in film studies, media studies, culture, and ethnic studies at California State University, Santa Monica College, El Camino College, and Rio Hondo. And I promised him that I'll shorten his bio, but I'm actually going through some of those. And in addition to higher education, he owns his own entertainment company called 67 Entertainment, correct? And it's a Los Angeles-based film and television and new media company. His most recent production, which he did in 2024, you have to see the writing of it. It's Not Without Alonso, and he'll probably tell us about it. Has won already 3 awards during its festival run, including 2 Best Documentary Award and the other one for Best Feature Film at three prestigious film festivals. So he's been a lifelong community activist, servant for justice. It's in the area of human relations council in the Bay Area. He's been very active, and he's a board member in so many institutions for academic achievements. And he will tell you a little bit more about himself, since I promised I will not use all of the paragraphs in his bio. I'm going to cut it short. It's a true honor and pleasure to be introducing you, Tim. So take it up.
Thank you. I was saying earlier out in the foyer that I always get embarrassed when the bio is read, especially, you know, sometimes places I've spoke, they ask you to send a long bio, and I'm like, oh man, how do I write this where it's still kind of brief so we can get to the work and not focus on all the accolades? And I'm very grateful that I've been blessed to be here to have achieved some things, because as I was telling my students this morning, there was a time where that could not have happened. There was a couple of moments in my life where I could have lost my life because of choices and decisions. People I was hanging out with as a young man that were not going in the direction that the good Lord had set for me on my path. And I'm so very grateful to be here and to try to guide young people into thinking about positivity, into thinking about their futures, into thinking about how we can change the world. And that has a lot to do with why I make films, because I want people to learn about people who were thinking about changing the world, or subject matter that is really relatable to situations that individuals are going through. At first, I wasn't going to show any stuff from my work, but I thought maybe if I showed anything, maybe just a teaser and a couple of trailers from some of the films that I've been involved with, either as a director or a producer. Most of my work has been in producing films. Every now and then I step behind the camera to direct, but I mostly enjoy producing and bringing the entire project together. So I will show you just a few pieces of material that I've worked on. What was mentioned in the bio, the first film is here is Not Without Alonso, and there's an N period, O period, N period, W period, O period, so A period. So, wait a minute, did I say that right? Not without A period, yeah, N period, W period, A period, okay. So NWA. If you don't know who NWA is, they were a group, I will not repeat the actual words to the racial epithet from, they were a hip hop group, but before reality rap, before gangster rap, there was an entire movement that was happening in South Los Angeles, as it's called now. It used to be called South Central Los Angeles, and in Compton, California, and they're neighboring to each other, right? And there were young people who were thirsting for something beyond the challenges of poverty, the socioeconomic challenges happening in the community, the things that were sort of gut-wrenching happening in these two communities, predominantly African American. And the arts became that pathway. And a young man at the age of 22 was given the good fortune to open a nightclub. And it was a teenage nightclub. They didn't serve alcohol there. This was for teenagers. And in that nightclub, opened the door for people who wanted to be in dance, for people who wanted to be DJs, mixing records at that time. for people who wanted to rap, because rap became brand new. And so it was at the sort of the tail end of the disco era, moving into funk stayed around, rhythm and blues stayed around, but it moved into this new movement, and they were into this fascinating music that was coming out of Germany from groups like Kraftwerk, and it was electronic music. So they were sort of intersecting funk, R&B, taking from disco what they liked and all the bad stuff that they didn't like. They left it back in the 70s. And they created this new movement of music and culture. And that was at the cusp of this culture that came across called hip hop, right? And hip and hop are words that come from other movements of African American culture and dance and just having a good time. Just like rock and roll came from the African American community as well. So this first piece is about the godfather of West Coast hip hop, Alonzo Williams, and we sort of did a play on his name, NWA, not without Alonzo, hence the periods, because there would have been no Dr. Dre or Ice Cube or all of these guys had he not opened the door in his facility for them to start getting a chance and practice at working in this craft, and so many others. And he saved so many young people from gang banging, from going to jail, from getting into trouble. So for me, it's important to tell these kinds of stories about individuals. And he started doing this at the age of 22. So he was a young man himself figuring this out. All right, I've talked long enough. You can tell I'm really into the movies I make. Let me show you a little bit of the content.
Love Connections. Welcome to our home audience. Let's get started by meeting our first guest. He enjoys picnics and going to auto shows, dates up to 7 women at a time. But he says that women aren't interested in the real him. Please welcome Alonzo Williams. Alonzo, welcome back. Well, we need to know who the real you is.
Well, Chuck, the real me is a real mellow type of guy who enjoys fireplace, sitting by the fireplace with a glass of wine, play maybe a game of chess, and just nice, mellow evening will have you. That's me, believe it or not, okay?
Well, now, the impression you give, what do you think the impression is that you give?
Well, I give the impression of arrogant playboy.
But you're not.
Yeah, I am. But
you are.
Without Alonzo, it'd be interesting to see what hip-hop would have become.
Well, without Alonzo, you probably wouldn't have any of it.
The West Coast hip-hop scene would not be what it is today.
The history of hip-hop, West Coast hip-hop, there is no history without Alonzo. There is no, for me, you know what I mean? I was chasing this guy around as a kid, trying to be like him with Jerry Curl.
You know, he was in charge of the World Class Wrecking Crew. That was him. There was Dre, there was Yella, those people were not heard of until Alonzo.
Without Alonzo, there would be no NWA. Without Alonzo, there would be no Studio East. Without Alonzo, there would be no Hollywood Park Casino. Without Alonzo, there would be no Current Affair. Alonzo has been around this game in LA for a long, long time.
You know, Alonzo was the catalyst for Dr. Dre and Yella, who were cornerstones of the entire movement. That had Easy over there too, you know. And so the whole mixture was bubbling in Alonzo's backyard, and me too.
So to say that you started that and you took these artists all the way to where they are now is saying something. He got bragging rights for life.
And without Alonzo, I believe that the West Coast probably would not have hit when it did. It might have come much later or something. He's responsible for so much out here on the West Coast, you know? That's why they call him the Godfather, right?
Move on. This next piece is called American Whisper, and I was sharing with some of the friends out in the foyer there that American Whisper is based on a true story. The real story happened in 1977 or so. It is about an African-American businessman on the East Coast in Harlem, New York, who owned lots of different businesses, including some jazz clubs, etc. And his family lived out in the suburbs in New Jersey, and his wife and children were murdered, and the case was never resolved. And they didn't have the technology that we have today to try to resolve cases. So we hoped as a production team, by making this film and sharing some of his story, that maybe the police would open the case back up. That hasn't happened as of yet, and I'm not sure if it will happen. We released this film in 2020, but again, I like to tell stories that are really meaningful and about important subjects, or hoping to really change something in someone's life. So this is just a little bit. You can watch American Whisper on Amazon Prime or on Tubi streaming platforms. So the film is available on those two streaming platforms. And I was a producer on this.
That was the last time you saw your entire family before tonight?
Janine. Hey, baby girl.
Hi, Doc.
Any domestic problems, Josiah? Kids have any problems at school? Neighbors?
We're just a happy suburban family.
Whisper!
All right. You got the American dream, and I delivered it to you.
But Whisper, he's reckless.
More money, more money.
Did you murder your family?
We're gonna turn this thing inside out until we learn the truth.
What if they find out?
Man, you seriously got a problem with me.
They're coming for me next. I'm not gonna let them do it. Oh my! Do not stop shooting.
And this last is a teaser. It is from a film that has had a festival run and won some awards called Laiba. It was inspired by students in the USC Muslim Student Association. I worked for many years in the religious center, spiritual and religious center at USC with the dean there, and I was the director of media and communications there for a long time. And I learned a lot of the stories from the students, and this one is loosely based on some student stories, and also a movie that I love from 1967, Guess Who's Coming Over to Dinner, starring the great Sidney Poitier and a cast of wonderful, wonderful actors and actresses. So with that being said, I will show a little bit of this. It's just a teaser in the beginning, and I'm gonna probably have this available to see on a streaming platform soon as well. So that film is titled Laiba, and I had the privilege of writing this story and producing it. Laiba is a Muslim American young lady who goes off to college and falls in love with a Christian American young man. And she believed that this would be wonderful to bring home to her parents because her father always talked to her about Dr. King and unity and love and bringing communities together. But her mother had some different feelings about her not marrying a Muslim man from their background. So that kind of deals with the subject that some of my students were sharing with me, and we were tackling. So if you all like, we can do a little call and response. I'm going to transition here. I come from the church in my original religious background, and call and response is a part of my community. Call and response is what brings people together in love. So I'm going to say the words, and then you can just repeat after me. They're all here on the screen. Maybe we can do that together to sort of bring the energy of unity and love and peace more so in the room. So it starts out, where there is love. Where there is love. Nothing is too much trouble. 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 Where there is love. Where there is love. Where there is love. Where there is love. Nothing is too much trouble. 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 And there is always time, time, time. 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 Whoa, whoa. So I won't do it any further, but usually we sing this all together, and it sounds wonderful, and I thank you all for joining me in this. So these are some wonderful words inspired by a nobleman by the name of Abdu'l-Baha. And he, to those of us who are Baha'is, is the greatest exemplar of how to live a Baha'i life. His entire life was dedicated to serving the cause of God and humanity. And he went around to different places in the world trying his earnest try to bring people together, even when communities didn't understand that. Even when communities believed in segregation, he said, no, everybody gets a seat at this table. And so as Baha'is, we try to strive to live a life close to that as best we can in our day-to-day lives, in our day-to-day interactions with people. I'm going to talk to you today about what I title spiritual media literacy for a little while, and just what that is, and I won't keep you too long. I do have some questions, and if we have time, we'll do an interactive activity at the end. But if not, at least we'll get to the questions. I know we got started a little bit later, so I don't want to keep you too late here. The Universal House of Justice is the administration to the world of Baha'is that helps us with guidance, that helps us with direction, helps us with administrative capacities of what we can be as communities around the world in short form. And they said to what we call national spiritual assemblies, so those are administrative bodies that oversee the wonderful love and unity and inspiration and administration with communities and countries around the world that have different national spiritual assemblies. We have one here in America, in the United States. And so this was written to a national spiritual assembly. And what they said is the technological advancement is integral to the emergence of a global civilization. That technology is important to the emergence of a global civilization. Indeed, the internet is a manifestation of a development anticipated by the guardian of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi, who was also another freedom fighter for justice and truth, and helped to bring this administration and love and unity and direction into fruition in the Baha'i faith. Shoghi Effendi, when describing the characteristics of a unified humanity, he foresaw that a mechanism of world intercommunication will be devised. And we're there now, right? Embracing the whole planet, right? Freed from national hindrances and restrictions and functioning with marvelous swiftness and perfect regularity. Yet, learning to utilize the internet in a manner conducive to material and spiritual progress is an immense challenge. And I think we can all speak to that now in the many ways that people are using media and social media. They are not always used in a way to spiritually progress, to bring people together, to create spaces of unity. In fact, many people do not know how to read the media, and there's a reason for that. We haven't been taught, per se, in large mass how to read the media. And one of the classes that I actually teach is on reading media, and that's some of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And there's a big problem with being able to move folks forward together in unity and in love and spiritual progress and using these technological tools for good. We have a digital divide, and that divide is the same kind of divide that we think about when we think about segregation or apartheid that has happened in different parts of the world. It has divided us and not brought us together. And some of that same energy has happened in terms of digital technology. But there are folks like myself who are fighting and hoping to change that across communities, whether it be on a university campus like this or out in the community in some other capacity. So I'm going to show you, let's look at a message on communications, especially, this is near and dear to my heart, affecting mostly communities of color, a lot of the digital divide. And this is a gentleman by the name of David Suffin. He's a Chief Strategy and Engagement Officer of 2U, a company focused on working with higher education institutions and the migration to the digital space. And I've had some relationship with them in my time when I was at the University of Southern California. Let's take a look at what he says.
What is the single most important thing that would incentivize you to get connected if you're not already connected? And the answer was digital literacy. Now, if you talk to people of color about what they want, we want a good education, we want opportunity for our kids, we want to stay connected, we want to be part of our community. The fact of the matter is, there are still very, very, very few people of color who are entrepreneurs in the technology space. But part of the reason for that is there is an innovation divide and a kind of a literacy divide when it comes to technology. And so it may be the case that Hulu and Twitter and Facebook and Google and all these amazing companies have been started, but it's hard pressed to name one that's been started in the last 10 years that's run by a person of color. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the open internet. That has everything to do with the fact that there are not enough people of color who are exposed to this amazing ecosystem.
And so this is why this work is also important to me. Coming from the inner city, I can remember a conversation with some guys in another life when I was a student athlete, and we were on the bus, and we were on the bus going from Santa Monica to Santa Barbara. Now understand this, these are guys who had lived in LA all their life, had been to Santa Monica College, but had never gone down the street to the ocean before. And we were on PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, the one, and they're looking out the window and saying, wow, look how beautiful the ocean is. I've never seen it before. And I was flabbergasted. What do you mean you've never seen the ocean before? They had never, beyond going to Santa Monica College, they had never left the inner city of LA to see the world beyond that. And I think about how the internet can help people see the world even more, to bridge the gaps that are there, to bridge the gaps that are keeping us disunified and help us to be unified if used the correct way, right? So the Commission for Social Development made a statement of the Baha'i international community at the 59th session, and they said, notwithstanding the achievements of new technologies, various forms of social bias and inequity are often embedded in their design or application, which are unintentionally adopted by users. Decisions related to use and distribution are often left to a privileged few who may not foresee such consequences. In the case of digital technologies, this challenge is exacerbated as specific values and assumptions are engineered into products and adopted at a pace exceeding the capacity of even the most qualified legislatures to properly assess. In an increasingly interconnected and interdependent world, where more digital technologies are adopted out of perceived or actual necessity, unforeseen consequences arise, no matter how well intended a technological system or solution. Recognizing the power of technologies to open new opportunities and shape reality, an honest examination of presumptions and norms underlying their creation and use is therefore critical. How are we using technology? How are we making technology available? How are we bringing communities together using technology? And how are we thinking about equity in this conversation? And I know that word is under attack right now. People don't want to talk about equity right now. They don't want to talk about the need for inclusion. They don't want to talk about the need of using technology to bring it to diverse communities and then to bring us together in the spirit of love. But we want to talk about other things, but we need to have this conversation. You see, there is a digital divide. And John B. Horgan of the Pew Research Center shares that as the internet has spread through the population, adoption across population segments have been uneven. He continued, inequalities in tech adoption is defined as the digital divide and or the haves versus the have-nots. And this is an age-old conversation. You go back for centuries and certain people got education and others didn't. Certain people were allowed to learn how to read and others were not. Certain people have access to technology and others do not. And how do we shift that? We've got to push the people in power to shift it, and it starts at the grassroots. You know, during the civil rights movement, all those big changes that we saw in government started in rooms like this. It started with people who cared enough to want to fight for people to have equity and access. It started in a room just like this. It didn't start with Dr. King standing up as an orator over thousands of people. It started in small rooms with folks who were doing the work 20 years before Dr. King even said, "I had a dream." Folks like Ella Baker, who you may or may not have heard of, who were fighting for the justice of every individual to have access in this country. And at the core of the Baha'i faith, my practice now, is the fight for access, is the fight for equity, is the fight for love, is the fight that says, whatever your religious tradition, whatever your spiritual tradition, let's bring it together for everybody. And we are in the digital space now. We are in the technological world. So we need to understand, how do we remove the garbage of the past and bring the love into the future through digital technology is a great way to do that. The same report that I mentioned found the use of technology for professional and personal use varied by socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, level of access to technology. I don't expect you to be able to read all of this, even with the greatest glasses. And as I'm getting older, I have 2 pairs of glasses now. I never thought that was going to happen. I went to go to, my wife was like, "You really need to go to the eye doctor again." And so I went with her. And they started bringing up these lenses, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can see." I didn't even realize my eyes were that bad. And I was like, "This is amazing." But then I was like, "Oh no, I'm like my grandparents now. I got to put the different glasses on to see." Anyway, I've digressed talking about glasses. Let's get back to this. So this, I don't expect you to be able to totally understand, but we can see some discrepancies. In more affluent communities in the U.S., predominantly white American communities, we see more digitally ready folks. And this is 17% of U.S. adults were in this, 31% of adults here, 33% of adults here, 5%, 14% of U.S. adults. But we see the numbers are far more advanced. Look, 65 to 12 to Black and then Hispanic. These are just some of the statistics that were found. So those are jarring numbers for me. Also, non-parents are more so into the digitally ready space, which does not shock me. A lot of young people are oftentimes more digitally ready than others. Interestingly enough, 18 to 29, not as digitally ready as 30 to 49. There's an assumption that young people have all the advances in understanding all the technology, but that doesn't mean that they understand every application and the ones that they're going to need to work out into the work world or to bring communities together. So this is some interesting information. I won't go through all of this, but something that was really interesting to me, it was also folks with a bachelor's degree or more had the highest numbers of being digitally ready versus others. So after I finish today, if there's any folks that want to see all of this work and research, I'd be happy to share it with you from the Pew Research Center. My good friend and scholar and friend, Dr. Ruha Benjamin of Princeton University, wrote a book called Race After Technology, and she really does a lot of research in this digital space. And she defines something called the new Jim Code, is the employment of new technologies that reflect and reproduce existing inequities, but that are promoted and perceived as more objective or progressive than discriminatory systems of the previous era. So all of that junk that was a problem before digital technology is making its way in. And she's arguing that we need to be paying attention to this if we're going to change communities, and we're going to talk about equity, and we're going to talk about bringing all the folks together in an inclusive and equitable way when it comes to the use of digital technology. Now, this is some of my research. I told you I teach a class called Media Literacy. We talk about the human brain, and it performs two types of processing in terms of information it receives. The first is called meaning matching. This is the ability to match previously learned information to provide meaning. The second is meaning construction, the ability to construct information perceived to provide a file or storage of meaning for current and future processing. This process is based on one's operating system or frame of reference. If you could think about your brain for a moment, like your iOS system on your phone or your operating system on the phone, what does the phone have to do every so often? What does it have to do? It has to, besides charging, it does have to do that, but it has to go through updates. Imagine if you're not updating your brain to be thinking about equity, diversity, inclusion, unity, love, bringing communities together, changing the world, and you're stuck in the thinking of the past. Or if you're on the internet all the time looking at negative, 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 what is going to happen to your brain? Every time it brings meaning to something or it constructs new meaning, it's going to be based off of the information it's been processing. So, for example, it makes sense that sometimes there's something called pretext stops. There's something called making a judgment about somebody that looks like me when police officers pull them over in a car. I went as a witness to a crime that happened, and I went on the stand in a court, and the judge said, and I'm not a criminal here, I'm here as a witness. He says, boy, I've never had one as big as you in here before. What does that mean? I've never had one. Sir, I'm a human being. I have a name. But all he saw was a large black man. So his meaning matching or construction told him that somebody looks like me is like everybody else that's a criminal in that court or that jail across the street that we call the Twin Towers in downtown LA. That we're nothing else. And you know where that comes from? That's construction from yesteryear. What was that construction? That construction comes from chattel slavery in America. What was the definition during chattel slavery of somebody that looked like me? Buck, large, black man, lacking much intelligence, much like mental retardation, who only has a few goals in his life. Rape white women, kill white men, eat fried chicken and watermelon. Very dangerous, not capable of much mental capacity, and some of them have tails. Wow. You know, some of the men my grandfather was with, and in World War II and in the war before that, in World War I, they were asking the black men, do they have tails? Let me see your tail. That was the meaning construction and the meaning matching happening then. And some of that same meaning matching and construction still exists today. So the reason why I do these talks, the reason why I teach these classes is to get students and others to break that cycle, because none of that is truth. The divine messenger of the Baha'i faith said, the earth is but one country and all mankind its citizens. It didn't say this group of mankind and that group of mankind. And by the way, these terms to identify human beings that we use in this country, black and white, do y'all know where that came from? Where'd it come from? Chattel slavery in America. Before the 1600s, 1619 to be exact, there was no such thing as a white person. They were Europeans. They were Irish, Scottish, British, German, so on and so forth. And they were proud of where they came from. And somewhere along the lines, some of the rich white males, not white females, because you weren't considered to have any rights as a white female. Some of the rich white males were realizing that they were getting outnumbered by the poor white males and the Africans, and that they might revolt against them. And so they started to create laws and to create this thing that had actually started during the Spanish Inquisition in the 1400s called race. And so this is the white race and everybody's in this category, and this is the black race and everybody's in this category. Segregating all the identities of the Africans from all the nations that they came from across the continent of Africa, or putting all the identities of all of the Europeans into one bubble. Now, we still say white and black today because this has been something that has been with us over time, but I like to give a little bit of understanding about that, because we must understand that if we're going to conquer the issues around meaning matching and construction, we need to move past white and black, brown, yellow, whatever all these colors we come up with, and come up with one unified thing beyond color. It's love. And I don't mean I don't see color, because I see color everywhere. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to move beyond these titles that have been so troublesome and think about titles that are bringing us into unity and love. And the internet is a great way to do that. Let me show you an example of what's happening in Baltimore.
Some issues transcend both rural and urban jurisdictions. And so we can look at the digital divide similarly.
You gotta have connections in order to move forward and take care of yourself.
Broadband has become so important, it is now not like water or electricity, it is like streets, it's like sidewalks. Baltimore, we have hundreds, if not thousands of miles of fiber optic cable running under the city. Still, some of the communities I go to, they're blocks that can't even get one of the regular signals. Thank you very much for joining me. My job is to go into the community and find out what some of the critical needs are that we have not met. Welcome. On your way, there we go.
I am black, I am blind, I'm bold, and I'm beautiful. When I started losing my vision, I realized that it was very difficult to stay connected with the community, what was happening. I needed to get skills and I needed to get training. As a blind person, I need Wi-Fi in order to connect a lot of apps. It's not just a luxury kind of thing, it's a necessity. So when you talk about trainers, what are you thinking?
Working with Marguerite, every conversation I have with her, her lived experience transforms our organization. Those are the types of gaps that we're looking to fill.
Part of my work is to come out into the community and be seen, teaching from my example.
As a funder and as the city, we are engaging and helping people in a way that they need to be supported. Access is not just about broadband. We have to make sure that we are educating people, that we are engaging them to be successful.
That's the beauty of diversity. It encourages all of us to be more creative and come up with things that serve us all. And when people find out that they're going blind, they think that it's over for them. I'm here to tell them that there's not only light at the end of the tunnel, there's light in the tunnel.
So I think this is a wonderful story. The city of Baltimore has created a job for this gentleman to help folks like this lady here who is blind, but bringing her together with the rest of the folks in the community and using the digital technology to make sure that she's up to speed and everybody is up to speed together. So whether you are blind, whether you are black, whether you are white, whether you are older, whether you are younger, whether you are in the middle of the road, let's do things to bring folks together. And this happens at the grassroots level again. The city of Baltimore just doesn't come up with this initiative. This happens with the people who are fighting for justice so that this lady does not feel that because of her physical impairment that she's impaired from life. She's living a full life because the technology has been made in a way that's comparable to assist her and to assist others. One of the things that's important to understand as we're going to engage in the digital space is something called media literacy. Media literacy is important. It is the ability to identify different types of media and understand their messages being sent. In the digital space, we don't always know who created the content or if the source is credible. We need to shift the coding that has been sent to every operating system in the world, that is the human brain. And so this is why this is so important to me for you all to be thinking about this and to become more media literate. It is on a continuum. You'll be doing this for your entire life, becoming more media literate and learning how to pull, as I tell my students, to pull back the onion. We don't look at something just because it says it on the page. Let's pull back and make sure, what is the accuracy? Who is the source that's saying this? Is this source valuable? Is this source giving you information that is accurate? Is this source giving you information that is going to help or shift things? Or is this source just doing what we called in radio for many years a shock jock who gets on the air just to stir people up, to be a rabble rouser? We see a lot of rabble rousing in our political spectrum in this world. But what about doing something opposite of rabble rousing and love rousing? I made that up, I know. Love rousing. Let's do something different than rabble rousing, right? I have another video to show you here. And this is just a further explanation of media literacy.
Media literacy is not only the ability to understand information being presented to us, but also determining the best way to respond to it. When we say media, we are speaking about the way people communicate around the world, whether it is through print, radio and television, the internet, or new forms of media. For the past century, mass media has been produced by corporations or state entities that control the content and messages communicated to the public. These organizations edit news, advertising, and other information before the public sees the final product. New digital technologies, such as social media, allow for a new, freer flow of information. No longer do we rely solely on one source of information, but our information comes from a wide variety of sources. In addition, each and every person has the ability to contribute to the public exchange of knowledge. Of course, the information that we receive may still be biased, so it is important that we understand how messages are created and consumed in all forms of media. This understanding is the definition of media literacy.
When I think of literacy, I think of books, learning how to read, right? Then I learned that media literacy is about reading the media from a critical point of view. Understanding that we're living in relationship with media, because we are. And I started to see media from a whole new perspective. And then I started thinking, when are my kids, when are any of us not plugged into some sort of media? Am I okay with my kids, with anyone's kids, spending nearly 11 hours a day with media? How much of what my kids believe to be true is coming from a voice in media, not particularly in line with my own? Whose messages are they walking around repeating? Is there any space between who they are and the media they're immersed in? What role is media playing in their lives? In our lives?
So I have a big challenge as a professor. All my students have something called FOMO. Do you all know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. And I have a joke that I say at the beginning of the semester in the classes. That phone or that tablet, it speaks to you. And it speaks directly to your brain, and you're hearing, pick me up, talk to me, look at me. What he's saying is not very important. Trust me, everything that I'm going to give you is so much more important than he is. And I really have to work hard to get them to not do that. Sometimes we're talking an hour and 15 minutes. You can't put it down for an hour and 15 minutes. So I have an even greater task now than when I started teaching. And that is to train students that if you're going to pick up that device, how to use it more effectively. If you're going to create a TikTok video, why not create one that's changing your community? If you're going to create an Instagram reel, why not think about one that could change a global community? If you're going to create any type of short form visual media, which is what doc shorts are and those posts that they put up, why not do something that's really going to be impactful and meaningful? And I'm also talking and teaching older adults how to use the technology. We didn't get enough students to come to this event. Where did you post it at? Well, we put it in the email. They're not reading your email. I hate to tell you, the older folks are reading the email and sometimes they don't read it. We are on information overload, all of us. All of us are on information overload. How many of you go through your day and you're like, oh my gosh, another email, another email? It happens to me and I miss them sometimes because there's too many. So we have to meet people where they're at. We have to make this equitable. So for example, if I'm working with young people and students, I need to know what are the social media spaces that they're most likely in and how do I make sure that I get this information in that space? I can't think traditionally. You know, I'm the last era of people who grew up before the internet. So the internet has changed things. I asked my students last week, how many of you watch TV shows on an actual TV? In a class of 45, 3 students raised their hand. In a class of 45. That is forever changing things. That makes me think as a content creator, how am I creating content to be on such a small screen? Because the content I'm creating oftentimes is actually for a screen like this or larger, not even just a regular television screen. And if you don't have a big TV in your house, you're not probably watching something that big, right? And so now I have to think different and I have to think about how do I make communication and content accessible for young people and older people and make it make sense. And how are people engaging? And even social media has changed. How many of you use Facebook? Few folks? Yeah. Most of the people who use Facebook are 65 and up. Exactly. 65 and up. That's okay. How many of you in this room use Instagram? Okay, more people use Instagram. How many of you use TikTok? I'm shocked. The young people aren't using TikTok. What are we using?
I don't know. I only use, well, I guess, yeah, Snapchat.
Snapchat? Is Snapchat still being used? Because my students are not using Snapchat as much. So out here at Laverne, the students are using Snapchat still. Okay, cool. Okay, so some TikTok, some Snapchat. How many of you use Reels or check Reels out? Okay, you check. What about YouTube Shorts? Okay, so Instagram Reels seems to be a really popular one. So this is something that I would need to know in order to figure out how do I make the communication equitable and accessible to you. I would also need to know from the group over here, where are you receiving most of your content? Where do you all receive most of your content? On the computer? Baha'i World News? Television? So these are all the things of somebody like me has to be thinking about. If I'm going to make this fair and just and equitable, how am I spreading the content? Who is my audience? What is the information I'm providing to that audience? And how is it accessible? Wait a minute, some communities don't have the same level of access to the internet for any of this communication that we're talking about. So how do I then fight and push to make it accessible? Who are the folks I need to talk to in the political spectrum or the city to make this accessible? This is the work now. The work has just shifted in terms of justice on figuring out who do we talk to make sure that everybody has access. And then what type of content do they have access to? Is it just the fluff of the day? You know, I was telling my wife after the current president was elected, somehow the algorithm was just sending me all kind of stuff about political stuff. And it took a while for me to shift that because I didn't want to see all that stuff. That's not changing the world for me. What's changing the world for me is the stuff that I'm doing now and the stuff that my colleagues are doing now, reaching out to communities. So that's the kind of content I want to see. I also realized that the content I was getting a lot of, I realized I watch a lot of cooking type stuff. So I get all of these like internet chefs and amateur food critics that go to these random places I'm probably never going to go to, but I find myself watching it. So anyway, I digress. But the point is we have to make things accessible. I'm not going to go too much further, but I want to just share just a couple of key things that are important before I transition. Identify the role of media in our cultures and our communities. Media is telling a certain narrative, shaping our understanding of the world, and compelling individuals to act or think a certain way. Hence, reprogramming of coding and the human brain operation system is needed. We need to reprogram our coding system. A digitally literate individual is someone who has a good balance of the digital space and engagement, the digital skills, their attributes, their practices and identity. So that as you become a more digitally literate person, you'll understand that every 7 seconds that algorithm is paying attention to what you just watched. Don't spend time on stuff that's useless to you, that is not going to help you grow, that is not going to bring positivity to you. I tell my students all the time, don't watch crap. And the first thing I tell them is when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should not be pick up your phone. Put the phone down for 5 minutes, at least. Take a deep breath. And tune your mind. You have breath again. You have vision again. Your brain is functioning again. What are you grateful for? Start with that. Take some deep breaths. For me, I do that. I meditate, I pray, and then I move into other things that I have to do, which may even include using the digital space. But give your brain a moment to bring itself into the right energy before you dive in. So a digitally literate individual is communicative. They understand the importance of networks and communication. Right? They are confident user of digital technologies and understand how to capitalize upon the differences between the analog and the digital worlds. They are creative in the use of digital technologies to create new things which add value to oneself and others. Thanks for coming. They are civic. A digitally literate person understands that to be civic in the digital space is to make use of digital technologies in order to be prepared for full participation in society. And in examining digital citizenship, a digital citizen refers to a person utilizing IT or information technology in order to engage in society and all of its efforts and needs, right? So digital literacy is the ability to, again, find, evaluate, create, and communication and information requiring cognitive and technical skills. It functions as finding and consuming digital content, creating digital content, and communication or sharing it. So I have one other video here about something happening in Wichita, Kansas. Any of you ever been there? I don't think most people have been to Wichita, Kansas. I lived in Wichita for a little while, and I never thought I was going to be in Wichita, Kansas. I had a job there for about 6 months, and it was an interesting place. I never ate so much gravy and chicken fried steak and all of those Midwestern, Southwestern meals as I did when I was in Wichita, because we just didn't eat that stuff out here in LA. But it was a wonderful and warm community out there, and I had a good time in Wichita. So even if you're driving through, stop by and have a meal in Wichita sometime. All right. So let's take a look at this.
According to the Pew Research Center, only 54% of adults feel confident using their computers or smartphones. This is called digital literacy.
Digital literacy, at its core, it's really about
the ability for individuals to utilize technology to improve their daily lives.
It's being able to access information out on the digital web and making it tangible to your life and to your business.
Digital literacy to me is the ability to function in a digital society.
And if you think about that, that's a wide spectrum of capabilities depending on what you're talking about.
Today's companies are heavily reliant on technology, even for basic things like payroll or internal communications. If our workforce isn't able to perform basic tasks online, chances are they aren't very employable.
We're quickly coming to a time where it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to use computers.
Even if it's simple things like record keeping, payroll, technology is utilized widely across all businesses.
So even someone who's been out just a little bit and then trying to come back, it's extremely hard when you come in there and there's this whole new skill set that you need to know and you're not familiar with.
While coding and software development are becoming important skills to have, this is more about the simple things we all have to do, like checking email. It can be difficult to even find a job without using the internet. And even if you do, you're probably going to need those skills once you get one.
Nearly every company is going to expect a basic level of technology comfort, and that's on the front end to be able to apply with the companies. The application process requires an online submission, and there's interaction back and forth with the business, communication, email, done through the web.
In today's environment, I mean, you have to be able to transpose that. Can I get a job? How do I fill it out? Where does it go? Does it email me? Right, it's the simple stuff. A lot of people take that for granted, right? You go home, you have a laptop, you just pull it out and start using it. Well, a lot of people don't have that opportunity.
The Pew Research Center identifies 5 groups of people who are less ready for the digital age than others. Of those, people from lower income households with lower levels of formal education are more likely to be less digitally literate. In other words, those with fewer opportunities to begin with.
We look at digital literacy as access. How do people actually get their information? How they get access to technology?
A community is only as great as its education level. That doesn't necessarily mean 4-year college education at all. That's being able to use the resources that we have that are free, that are obtainable, and this is a great resource.
I think at every level, I think citizens really just need to continue to support the organizations, whether that's the library, whether that's a private organization, that they really feel is impacting the community.
It's not just about the city, right? It's about this community. And how do we kind of embrace the opportunities that we have and technology? Because it's not going away.
I'd like to see the community continue to bridge that gap and continue to push us forward.
So this is what they're thinking about in Wichita, Kansas. Small town America, right? And we are just, 45 miles east of Los Angeles, the big city, and even a smaller community, whether it's Laverne or San Dimas or any of these other surrounding communities here. I know some folks here from Rancho Cucamonga and other places in the Inland Empire. What are we thinking about in our cities? What are we thinking about in our communities? At the foundation and at the root of the Baha'i faith is to be a faith of service. So how are we being of service to everybody? What are we thinking about and how do we shift these things in the communities? Do we even know what our cities are doing in terms of making access available to the digital technologies for all of the citizens? What are we doing to shape that and shift that? On the college campus, how are you interacting with each other? Are we using the digital technology for silly things, or are we using the digital technology to bring people together? These are some of the things that I challenge my students with.
So you kind of talked about the not using social media as much for these silly purposes. Do you think there is a place for that still, or do you think it should really more so be just for creating communities or fostering communities?
So there is obviously a place for comedy, jokes, laughter, right? But we don't want to use social media just as a place, what I like to call dead space, right? Where it's just not leading to any kind of purpose. We want to use the technology as well to create vibrancy in a community, to invigorate individuals and communities. And one of the purposes of this talk today is to think about how do we bring people together with access and bring unity in a community. And so the internet is a great way to do that. I actually have something on another slide that I will leave with Sohaila, and I I'll make that available for you all. Actually, I think I already left it with you. It's a movie proposal idea, and there's a whole activity that I have folks do in terms of creating something using social media.
Thank you. It's a great question, by the way. Our group was just talking about that as well. Other questions that you'd like to ask? Great, let me bring the mic because it's really hard to hear.
Thank you, Mike. It was such an inspiring and stimulating conversation, so much to think about. How would you advise us and younger people in terms of what can we actually believe as true? Because there's so much coming at us, and we know that what we see on the internet isn't necessarily the truth and nothing but the truth. With all these things coming at you from various news outlets and different platforms spouting their version of reality, how can we better filter that to really come to some sense, some resemblance of truth, whatever that your take on that is?
Good question. So the first thing is a lot of this is made to create some type of emotional reaction and to convince the brain and the ego that this is real, this is the absolute truth, and there's nothing else. We have a lot of opinions that are being spewed throughout media, social media, new media. They're not always based in fact. And there was a period of time, even in journalism, where, as they would say in the old show, and no young person knows this, when Joe Friday would say, "Just the facts, ma'am," or "Sir, just the facts," right? That's an old 60s show. I shouldn't even know that. I was born in the 70s, but I teach classes around film and TV, so I know this stuff. So how do we get to more of that? It requires a little bit of work and education around not just taking something the first time you see it as the absolute truth. Okay, you've read something now, pause with it. If it's of interest to you, you got to dig deeper. You got to do the same thing you would do if you were writing a research paper. You got to provide the evidence, right? One thing I learned in the doctoral process, take out all the adjectives and adverbs. Stick to the information. They were very strict on that. Stick to the information, okay? And that's the same kind of process, and it requires us to do a little bit more work. Now, if you're tired and you don't want to do it at the moment, don't do it. But if it's something of interest to you, do that. And also the other thing is, don't just take something as face value to be the absolute fact. The more you train your brain to pull things back, you'll start to see the things that don't make sense as being absolute truth. And there's some techniques in how to do that. I'm happy to speak to anybody more further on just some basic skills on how to just start to decipher things as you're receiving them on the internet. And one of the things I will always say, especially if it's coming from the news now and the government now, you're gonna have to pull back the onion all the way, because there's a lot of opinions coming out and you don't know if that stuff is fact or not. There was a time when they didn't do that, but boy, do they do it now, and they do it loud and clear. I hope I answered your question.
If there are no other questions, I would like to just bring up a point on a positive note to balance what that judge said to you. And that's sharing with the audience what the training and education of judges and the legal community is coming. They're catching up with the neuroscience research. They're training us to watch videos that undo some of the effects, and training us that when we listen to facts and we want to make a decision about a scenario presented to us, to be very mindful and aware of the layers that are deeper in our brain, that are preset and preconceived notions have been instilled in it. They're just making us just like dig in and undo some of our learning and training, and doing that scientifically. And it's just across the board. So it's good news to know that the legal community is catching up with that. I'm
happy to hear that, because there's never been a time, whether I've gone for jury duty, whether I've gone as a witness to a crime, into a court area, not even in the courtroom, that I don't see police officers clenching their firearm or doing these ridiculous things that they may not even be consciously aware that they're doing over and over again. We have conscious and unconscious bias that's happening, and this is programming that's happened over a long time. And I haven't even been suspended from school, let alone gone to jail. I've been very fortunate and lucky throughout my life, and there were some times where I could have gotten, you know, I've spoken in jails and juvenile halls, and I always tell these folks, you know, I've been 1 to 2 steps away from being in here, and it's just the situations that many young black men have been in America. And so I'm happy and encouraged to hear that people are thinking about shifting some of this thinking, because it's ridiculous. One planet, one people.
But thank you. One additional point is that when you talked about the jury, we should know that the jurors are finders of fact. But when they train judges, or some of us as substitute judges, it means that we've started from one set of fact finders, but the jurors in most of the criminal cases where that really makes a difference, they're not being trained on these neuroscience, you know, learning and technology.
We need digital media literacy for all the communities, so those jurors come in too. Thank you.
I know that there's more questions, but I think what we can do, because I am sure that you'll stick around for a few moments, that people who have additional questions, that you can ask your questions. I want to say something that has sunk very deep inside me from what you shared is the intentionality of my role as a user. I've got 7 seconds. And the intentionality of content creation to do something that actually contributes to the vibrancy of community. Those are ethical roadmaps that I think are very beautiful. And thank you for...
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for being here. We are here to create peace. And we do it every moment that we bring ourselves to something like this, or carry something forward into our present and future.
Can I just ask for just one more minute and a half? It's just a Black Baptist preacher in me. You have to forgive me. I'm just going to do it with a few divine manifestations. But before we start anything, we would do something like this. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Jesus is my doctor. He writes me all my prescriptions. He gives me all my medicine in the prayer room. In the prayer room. I'm going to move to another manifestation. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Muhammad is my doctor. He writes me all my prescriptions. He gives me all my medicine in the prayer room. In the prayer room, one more. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Baha'u'llah is my doctor. He writes me all my prescriptions. He gives me all my medicine in the prayer room. In the prayer room. Now that same prayer is really a call and response. So when I say, is my doctor, and you always say, doctor. He writes me all my prescriptions, and you always say, prescriptions. Gives me all my medicine in the prayer room. So let's do it one more time. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Baha'u'llah is my doctor. He writes me all my prescriptions. He gives me all my medicine in the prayer room. In the prayer room. Thank you.